Welcome. Today we will be discussing the recent Apple case, the background and implications for other companies. We have here Jane Delaney from PwC in Ireland, and from the PwC State Aid Working Group, Sjoerd Dauma and Jonathan Hare. Welcome.
Thank you.
Jane, what is the case about?
Well, as has been widely reported, the case is about agreements between Apple and Ireland about the taxation of two companies. And these companies weren't Irish tax resident, but they had Irish operations or branches. And the question is, how much profit should have been attached into those branches for Irish tax purposes? The Commission has looked at the agreements and has said, we don't think they reflect economic reality, and we think that therefore means that Ireland gave state aid to Apple. The final result of all of that is, at the moment, the Commission is saying Apple is going to need to pay to the Irish government approximately €13 billion plus compound interest as recovery of that state aid.
So, here we have an agreement, a US multinational with an agreement with the Irish tax authorities. Sjoerd, why would that be problematic from a state aid perspective?
Well, Steve, we have not seen the detailed decision yet, but we have seen the press release. And in the press release, the Commission is not only focusing on the attribution of profits to the branches, but also on the attribution of profits to the head offices. And the Commission is saying in the press release, since there's not a lot of activity in the head offices, according to the Commission they are empty or almost empty, Ireland should not have attributed profits to those head offices. And by doing so, nevertheless, Ireland has granted an unlawful advantage to Apple in comparison with, for example, a standalone company.
But isn't that a very strange approach? I would say if I see a company that has a non-resident company that has a branch in Ireland, the only thing I have to do is look at the attribution of profit to that branch based on the activities taking place there, a functional analysis of that activity?
I completely agree. If you look at the OECD commentaries, that is clearly the approach. The question is, of course, why is this then happening? Well, it might be because, if we look at the question, how should you determine whether an economic advantage is granted? Is that under the Irish rules, under OECD rules, or is there perhaps a pan-European approach? The Commission calls that the EU principle of equality, treating like with like, which is a European standard.
And I think that's really important, Steph, because that raises the question as to whether the European Commission here is, if you like, trying to harmonise transfer pricing or profit attribution across Europe. And if it is state aid really the appropriate mechanism for doing that? I think it's questionable.
So are you both implying that this is a novel approach that the European Commission is taking?
Indeed.
In my view, yes.
It is. So what next, Jane?
The next thing that happens is that within the next couple of months, Ireland and Apple will both appeal the decision. And that will set the process running through the European courts. We all know it's going to take several years to come to a final conclusion. At the same time, over the next short number of months, Ireland will be recovering the 13 billion plus compound interest from Apple and holding that in escrow until the case works its way through the system.
So are you saying, Jean, that even though this case will be pending for a number of years, the 13 billion has to be paid up front?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
So here we have a case where a US multinational thought it had agreement with the Irish tax authorities. It had agreement with the Irish tax authorities. The European Commission is taking what you call a novel approach and orders recovery for a period going back to 2003, I believe, 10 years effectively. 10 years. What's the reaction in the United States? We asked our US colleague Pam Olson.
The U.S. has expressed at least three concerns so far with the action of the European Commission to tax the profits of U.S.-based multinationals in Europe. The first is that the taxation represents a retroactive change in the tax rules. The second is that the effort is inconsistent with the agreement that was reached at the OECD with respect to BEPS, which would be to change the taxation of companies on a going forward basis. And the third is that the taxation is inconsistent with any of the current international tax rules.
So what are the implications for other companies, Jonathan?
Steph, I think the press release raises a very important point. The European Commission appear to invite other member states to revisit the question as to whether some of the profits should have been taxed in their jurisdictions, and indeed asks the US whether greater payments should have been made under the cost-sharing agreement. And the Commission suggests that if that's the case, i.e. if the profits should have been taxed elsewhere, then that could reduce the recovery by Ireland. But by doing this, I think the development is potentially raised way beyond state aid. Having other member states coming in and revisiting transfer pricing, or in the case of the US, payments are under cost-sharing agreements, that significantly widens the development beyond just state aid, I think.
To be clear on that, so the European Commission seems to be inviting other states to assess whether more tax could be charged for the past, and they are willing then to reduce the amount of the recovery.
That's exactly the position.
Okay. So turning to short, what should companies be doing?
Well, two things. First of all, review. Review whether your existing group structures are still fit for purpose, and when changing the group structure or entering into new arrangements, proactively review those structures also from a state aid perspective. Secondly, risk assessment and documentation. For example, discussions in the boardroom, for audit purposes, what is the level of risk you might be exposed to, and have you properly documented your position? Well, areas to look at are situations in the European Union where profits are not taxed or are taxed at a low level. What kind of instruments, tax rulings, advanced pricing agreements, settlements, and general tax regimes which result in low taxation.
So the message is very clear. This is a very serious development that companies need to be mindful of. Thank you very much for the discussion. I guess the message for all of us is to watch developments carefully and do appropriate review. We will certainly try to stay on top of the developments. Thank you.